RP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Semanas, your host for the brand new program sponsored by the NEVIS Reformation Party called Your Voice with the NRP. The NEVIS Reformation Party is by a country mile the oldest and most transformative party in the history of our island. In 1983, at the advent of independence, Dr. Simeon Daniel, founder, leader, first premier of NEVIS, and accepted by all as the founding father of modern-day NEVIS, ushered in the NEVIS Island administration. He saw it as a vehicle for the advancement of NEVIS, taking NEVIS from the political backwaters, and also for the upliftment of its people. Other transformative events include 1984, introducing the first land reform in the OECS. Of course, as a result of that, NEVIS and the Nevisians are among the most landed people in the OECS. It also spawned a number of housing developments like Cherry Garden, leaving NEVIS with one of the best housing stocks. Of course, in 1985, walking in the footsteps of U.S. founding father Alexander Hamilton, he fully understood that the development of a nation needed the underpinning of a strong financial sector. He therefore ushered in the Bank of NEVIS, which only this year set up operations on the neighboring island. And of course, in 1991, the coming of the Four Seasons, 30 years after, it is still the mainstay of the economy. The CCM in office for 9 years, going on 9 years, has clearly lost the vision. They've become subsumed by the federal government, and despite millions pouring into Charlestown, the economy is simply limping along. Enter Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, daughter of the revered first Nevisian leader. That came in 2020, the year of vision, and realizing that we were stuck in the quagmire, she decided it was time to save our beloved island. And here she is tonight to tell us about her plans going forward. She has decided with her NRP that change must come and that we have to change the momentum. So in studio we've got Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, and with her Cleone Stapleton Simmons. They're 2/5 of the 18 that will represent the NEVIS Reformation Party in the upcoming elections. The others are not here because of constraints of space, but they'll be joining us via telephone a little later in the program. Dr. Hodge and Mrs. Simmons, welcome. First, tell us a bit about this program. Why this program?
Thank you, our host, Mr. Stevenson Manners, and good evening to my colleague, Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons. Good evening to all listening here in NEVIS and abroad. And I would have to say that since 2020, when I became leader of the NEVIS Reformation Party, I would have been spending some time in the trenches, so to speak, listening to a number of residents on the island, and it became very clear to me that there was a large disconnect between what I was hearing on the ground and what was being represented by the government. And so it is obvious that if we are to be servants of the people as politicians, you can only serve someone when you understand what their needs are and when you understand what can be done in order to help alleviate some of the struggles that they are experiencing. And so we decided amongst the NRP executive, some of our supporters and the candidates, that notwithstanding prior concerns about certain labels or certain institutions, that the best way that we can really assist the Nevision public is to provide a forum where they can contribute some of their ideas, some of their struggles. And so we went through a process of brainstorming and came up with the idea that, you know what, your voice with the NRP would be such a breath of fresh air for the people who can now call into a radio station, have persons who can relate to their concerns and to their struggles, and find a way to help to address their concerns. So it's really because of the disconnect, because of so many different stories that we've been hearing, and the need for other persons to hear those stories and to provide some input as to how we can help to address those concerns, why we are here tonight with your voice with the NRP.
How much of it, what you've been doing over the past year, is on the inspiration of your father, who, as I said earlier, is the revered leader of NEVIS and the national hero? You obviously sat at his feet. How did he inspire you?
I think the inspiration came really not from him being a politician and me wanting to be a politician. I had a discussion just this afternoon with someone about how seeds can be planted at an early age and you do not recognize that those seeds are there until when some defining moment comes and you recognize this is what I am here for. And so understanding his compassion and his love for the people of NEVIS, understanding how his foundation was really based on the struggles of people and helping to get them out of those struggles. And so it's almost as if when we had the Christina disaster in 1970 and the NRP was formed, it was a very challenging and difficult time for the people of NEVIS. And in 2020, after the last election, and we realized the direction in which the country was going, there was no progress, no hope, no vision, and it was just something that I think that was the time for the seed to bloom. Understanding that development of a country is not just about the country and building infrastructure, but it really has to do with the development of the people and the standard of living and the quality of life that the people can enjoy. And recognizing all the struggles at that time, it just really, compelled me to come forward, understanding that I know what it is to work hard. I know what it is to make sacrifices. I understand that once you have a clear vision and once you have the right purpose for undertaking an activity, then you should be successful. And so let me just take a moment, if I may, to thank those persons within the NRP who would have given me their support. I am deeply humbled by the responsibility that has been placed on my somewhat narrow shoulders. But I think that based on the current situation that we're dealing with, the challenges, the need for extraordinary, bold and creative leadership at this time, and also because we're in a time where we see a lot of struggles, and the leader must be responsive to the people. And this is a time when we really would need to have compassionate leaders, leaders who can empathize with the people that they are serving. And so I understand, like many persons understand as well, that especially during this time of COVID-19, that the regardless of wealth, regardless of stature, we must work together to overcome these mutual adversities. We must have respect for each other as human beings, and when we treat each other as we would expect them to treat us, we can then live in harmony and look for a more fruitful life. And so I just want to thank, all of the NRP supporters here in NEVIS and as well as the diaspora for their confidence and their support, which is growing, stronger from day to day. And also my, deputy leader here, Cleone Stapleton Simmons. I would also like to thank her. She's the lone voice in our House of Assembly at this time, and she's really the voice for the poor and the struggling people. And so she has done a marvelous job in terms of expressing and challenging some of the bills that has been brought, which really seems to favor not the man on the street, so to speak, but the higher echelons of society. And so I would just like to say that throughout NEVIS, I've been hearing lots of concerns. And I thank many supporters. Some, we call people some blue or green. But regardless of whether blue or green, I think that there are many supporters all over NEVIS who are now understanding that change is not easy, but that if we are to improve our economy and to make NEVIS a better place for all of us, then change must come.
And certainly in one short year, you have really hit the ground running. And one of the things that you have done is come up with a slate of candidates which is unique in its own way. I don't think it has happened anywhere else in the Caribbean or perhaps anywhere in the world. 4/5 female. Now, I'm a big fan of Mia Amor Motley. I think she stands head and shoulders above all the male prime ministers in the region. Here in NEVIS, I think we have a little too much testosterone in the room in our government, and that tends to lead to arrogance and egocentric leadership. Now, you have come up with 4 out of 5. Tell us how you did that and why.
Well, Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons was the first in the party. I met her there. But really, as I mentioned before, once you understand where you're heading and what you want to achieve, it's very easy to then put the rungs on the ladder in the position that you would need. And so it really has a lot to do with understanding the perspectives of the various candidates. And so really I would have heard people saying that this is a historic moment, etc. But it is really about what the candidates stand for and what they're willing to fight for as representatives of the people. And so all of the 4 female candidates as well as the lone male candidate, we are all persons who are very much minded about the state of human affairs. We are all very much minded about the need for integrity and equality, and we're very minded about the need to have fair access to the basic goods and services in our community. And so it really didn't have that much to do with gender, but more based on the personalities and the principles that the candidate stood for. And so it's really about trying to have a good complement of candidates that we can tackle all aspects of governance and deliver to the people of NEVIS the type of prosperity that they saw once before.
Honorable Stapleton Simmons, you have been the standard bearer. First woman elected on an NRP ticket, and you've done so in the heartland of the NRP, a constituency which has brought 2 NEVISian premiers, the Honorable Dr. Simeon Daniel and the Honorable Joseph Parry. What has the experience been like carrying the torch for the NRP?
Thank you so much, Mr. Manners. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Your Voice with the NRP. It's a pleasure for me to be in studio this evening. So, as you know, I'm going now on my second year having been elected as a parliamentarian, and the experience thus far has been very humbling, I must say. I am indeed very grateful and appreciative to my constituents who elected me. They must have seen something in me, a bit of vision, passion, and compassion, and they put their trust and confidence in me to elect me to represent them. And so that has been an experience that I have been very grateful for. Now, over the past almost 2 years, I have been very active within the community with various initiatives. First, I started, I believe, in April of 2020, just a mere month after being elected on March 5th. As a parliamentarian, we started the community initiative with a food drive, because at that point in time, I think COVID was upon us, and so people were facing situations where they were being laid off from work, and we had a whole period of lockdown, and so it was really a time when people were in need. And so I decided to assist by distributing care packages, which a number of persons and groups and organizations were doing at that time. From there, I also introduced the Lowland Community Foundation, and that really was one of my campaign initiative, where I wanted to some way give back to the persons within the constituency, and give back in a meaningful way, which would impact the lives of persons. And so we started with the introduction of the Morella Webb Scholarship Fund, where we chose 2 students to give them some financial support as they continue their academic studies. With that initiative, we thought that it would have been nice to have it expanded, and so we introduced the entrepreneurship small business initiative, and from that I would have assisted one person in the constituency in the name of Brandon Hamilton to fulfill his dream of really establishing a barbershop there in Banscott. I learned from the Honorable Joseph Parry that you have to really teach a man how to fish rather than just continuing to give him fish. And so it is within that spirit and context that the Lowland Community Foundation continues to give back to the community and continue to assist people wherever we can, and to help them be able to fulfill their dreams. In terms of the actual experience within the House of Assembly, of course, it is indeed a learning experience for me. I think it has been tremendous so far in terms of being able to contribute in a meaningful way to the bills that are being passed in the House, and to give not only my perspective but the perspective of the NEVIS Reformation Party and the perspective of the people generally, as we look to see how this legislation will impact the lives of persons. One of the things I must say is that from my experience, I noticed that throughout this experience, that despite being in a pandemic, every time I went to Parliament, we were there to introduce a bill, a money bill, so to speak, or a taxation bill. And so one would have thought that there would have been some sort of relief or sensitivity towards the times that we were in, being mindful that a lot of persons are unemployed, a lot of businesses had to close. But despite that, we would have seen the introduction of various bills, including increases on water bill, fuel surcharge, and even in terms of planning, recently there were a number of increases in terms of planning applications and things like that. So despite being in a pandemic, despite the economic plight and the frustration of the people, we would have seen the system-led administration use this opportunity to increase taxes, some in a very conniving way, to the extent that sometimes people people do not realize, but at the end of the day, I think we all are feeling it. And so that has really been my experience in a nutshell. I continue to serve the people of St. Thomas's. I continue to work hard for the people. I continue to listen to their cries, and really, as a member of the NEVIS Reformation Party, we continue to coin our plans and our ideas and initiatives so that we can meaningfully address the needs of our people.
You see, that comes from the maternal instincts. We're going through a pandemic, and as we said, with all the testosterone in the room, they don't understand what mothers have to go through, looking out for children, sometimes many, crying because of hunger and all of that. And that's why having women is so very important. One of the things I've noticed, and it started when you made your entry into the assembly, one of the persons who stood up and applauded you, I can remember seeing the post on Facebook, was the Honorable Hazel Brandy Williams, who was always spoken about empowerment. And so she understood what women folk bring to the process. And she did the same thing for all the female candidates. So she is there with a number of men in cabinet, and she understands the way they operate, their modus operandi, and she readily and willingly wants to empower women, even if they come from across the political divide. Now, as I promised you earlier, we're going to try to hear from the other three candidates. They couldn't be here tonight because of protocols and space and all of that, but we're inviting them to call in. First, we expect to hear from J.D. Keynes, and then from Dr. Bartlett, and then from the Lord Neil candidate, Mr. Rohan Al. So get close to your telephones, and reminding the general public that you will have your turn as well. This is your voice with the NRP. So, Janice, it's been a hectic year. Are you where you would like to be at this point?
Yes, I would say that definitely very important for us was to be able to feel our candidates. And while we recognize that, you know, it may take a long process in order to get the candidates, it was very important for us as a party to identify the right candidates, have the opportunity for them to understand what our vision is with regards of the party, understand the principles upon which the party stands, and also to give them sufficient time to interact with the various communities that they would be representing, and really getting to understand and feel what each community would require. That has been quite important for us.
Okay, I think I can recall that the first launch was of Miss J.D. Keynes, number one in number one at the Villa Grounds. And I think we've got J.D. on the line. Good evening, J.D., number one in number one.
Number one in number one. A pleasant good evening from the capital city.
From capital city.
Yes.
You're a little low, though. I don't know if our technicians can turn it up a little bit. You're a little low, and we certainly would want our audience to hear you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening. And I was saying, I bring you greetings from the capital city, Charlestown. As you correctly said, number one in number one. I am beaming with pride, and I'm really excited, as my other colleagues would have indicated already, for us to have this program. Because, you know, I mean, we in the NRP have so much to say, and we know that the people of NEVIS equally have so much to say. And so this program, I think, creates that platform for us to hear from each other, for us to bounce ideas off of each other, and have meaningful dialogue about the affairs of the island of NEVIS. So I'm excited about it. I'm happy that you are here to facilitate us, Mr. Manners, and I'm happy that the Eastern Caribbean's Powerhouse One Radio has facilitated us, and I just look forward to wonderful episodes every Monday night.
Yes, it's going to be very exciting going forward. Now, since your launch, you have been hitting the pavement. What issues are impacting the minds of the persons, the constituents in your constituency?
All right, yes. Mr. Manners, I just want to make a note of correction. I have been hitting the pavement even before
Good for you.
and even before being a political candidate, because I feel that my upbringing has been centered around service and being involved in the community. So this is nothing new for me. However, in terms of the dialogue with the people of St. Paul, NEVIS 1, I realize that there are lots of burning issues. Some are identical to what we hear from persons in other constituencies, but generally the feeling that I'm getting and the comments that I'm getting as it relates to St. Paul is that we are almost like a forgotten constituency, a forgotten parish, where it's like we kind of get what the other constituencies don't want.
But how could that be, JD? You said you're calling in from capital city. Normally, the capital gets most of the treatment.
And that is what I would like to see. But this is the feedback that I've been getting. You know, persons are of the view that, you know, we could be getting more. And you're so correct. The fact that we're in the capital, that we comprise the capital, there's a certain level of development, a certain level of interest, a certain level of push that is expected that is not being felt as it should. That's what I'm getting from the residents of the constituency of NEVIS 1.
Now, the capital city has the Alexandra Hospital. We are going through a pandemic. Most governments in a pandemic make sure that their facilities, their health facilities are up to scratch, peak condition. We've got the Alexandra Hospital, which has been limping along for 4 years. We've heard all sorts of stories that it's moving apace. We have to remodel. It's a baffling story, to say the least. What do you make of what has been happening or not happening at Alexandra? It's in your constituency, even though it serves us all.
Yes, I've spoken about Alexandra Hospital on numerous occasions because I am really saddened by what is happening there, or what is not happening there, and I just feel that, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised though, because it speaks to the lack of foresight, the lack of vision, and the inept way in which our island continues to be run. Now, our health services must take priority, and this is even before COVID. COVID probably would have put the spotlight on health services, but we simply have not been pulling our weight. Now, I don't think that we will ever be at the level that we think that we should be, but definitely we can do far better in terms of what our offerings are at the Alexandra Hospital. And I don't in any way, shape or form blame the nurses or even the doctors there, because over time I realize that, you know, persons are really trying, and some of these persons go above and beyond, you know, these nurses and doctors and the ancillary staff. The problem is the policy direction has to come from the top, and we are not seeing that direction. And so the persons, the workers at the Alexandra Hospital are left to appear as if they are not doing a good job, but in truth and in fact, they are not being properly guided. There's so much more that can be done. Up to this evening, I had a conversation with a constituent about the Alexandra Hospital, well, health services generally, and we spoke about the fact that we are not doing enough to even attract nurses and employees at the community health level, to therefore bring some of the focus from the Alexandra Hospital, put it at the community health level, where I'm talking about like the health centers. That way the hospital can be there for more serious illnesses. But if we have not even empowered the health centers, I mean, how then can we speak about having an advanced Alexandra Hospital? It just doesn't make sense. It wouldn't work.
Okay, well, JD, by my reckoning, you're the youngest of the candidates. What have you got for us in the area of youth advocacy?
Mr. Manners, as I mentioned before, I try my best to stay abreast of what is happening in the community. And as a young person myself, I want to see other people doing well. I want to see the young doing well, the not so young doing well, and the aged doing well. But I can't help but have a bias for young persons because I'm a young person and I am also a parent. It bothers me to know that as it is right now, it does not appear that my child and my godchildren have that future lined up like we had, or persons a little bit older than I would have had based on the measures that would have been put in place by leaders before. What we have now is a situation where nothing is being put in place. So 10 years down the line, our children don't have anything to look forward to. There are no benefits. And so I believe that youth and youth empowerment must be front and center of any administration that is to be elected in the island, on the island of NEVIS. And I'm talking about education and training. I'm talking about entrepreneurship. I mean, these are just some of the things that I believe can help to really drive our people and really push youth empowerment on the island of NEVIS. I want our young people to be able to provide for themselves and their families. I want our young people to dream more. I want them to hope more. I no longer want our young people to feel that great things can only happen if you have a particular last name. And so I believe that with the slate of candidates that we have, a mixture of youth and experience, that we really can do a lot of great things in the area of youth advocacy. And I'm looking forward to that so much.
Well, thank you, JD, and we are looking forward to having you in the studio as well. Brilliantly spoken as usual. Have a great evening, and we're going to wait a call from Dr. Patricia Bartlett, panelist in the studio. What do you all make of what is happening or not happening at our primary health care facility?
Well, what I would say is that it's interesting that as she called herself political candidate, I made a note of that because there's a connotation with the term politician. But as she would have mentioned, that her constituency feels like they are the forgotten constituency. And I think that all of the constituencies share that same sentiment. And so if all are forgotten, then where are the benefits accruing?
Okay, just hold it there. I think we've got Dr. Patricia Bartlett on the line. Good evening, Dr. Bartlett.
Good evening, Mr. Manners, and how are you?
I'm doing fine. We're having a good time in the studio. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And to my colleagues, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, and Madam Stapleton, how are you guys doing?
We're doing well, Pat. Good evening.
Good evening, Pat.
Now let's cut to the chase here. You're from Brownhill.
Yes.
You're going up against the Premier of NEVIS, who's from Brownhill, and as he liked to say on the radio, you're cousins. It must be that you've found something wrong with the governance of the island while you're in the race.
Indeed. As heart-wrenching a decision as it was for me, I just had to. I just couldn't ignore the plight of the people, because what I was expecting and what we were getting were at diverse ends. And so really, I think that we need to get it fixed, and we need to get it fixed now, because NEVIS is not on a trajectory for doing well for all of the people, and that is what would have moved me. You know, I would have already, and I keep saying, I was never one to be in party politics and wear colors, because I just find that that kind of thing is kind of divisive. But I just had to make the decision to choose a side, and of course I had to use the underdog. I had to choose the side of the underdog. But I'm sure that, you know, we would succeed. If I could share with my colleagues, you know, just to boost their morale. Just today, I ran into a clergyman, and he said to me, you know, the unique slate of the predominantly female candidates that we have is not by coincidence. He said that is rather by divine intervention. And I felt comforted by that. And so, I'm supposed to continue the conversation with him to get to the prophetic part, of the prophetic word from him. But in the meantime, I just want to say to my colleagues, let us continue to rely on the Almighty for the strength and the guidance that we're going to need. And once we do that, we can't go wrong. We're not going to fail because we're here to serve our people.
No, your opponent is
served by the fact that we have, the premier, as the person who I'm coming up against.
Yeah.
Because remember the story about David and Goliath, right? I went to church yesterday.
Now, the Premier is an articulate man. He expresses himself well. And you say there's a big gap between what was expected and what has been delivered. Talk to us more about that.
Well, really, when we look at what is the state of affairs now, compared to when he took over, and, what moved me the other day, I had to look at the manifesto, and because a lot of times we hear the flowery speeches, not much substance. So I said, to get a perspective as to what substance might have been offered, I went to the manifesto, or the PCCN manifesto of 2017, and I'm looking through all the things that were promised, and we're miles away from achieving any of those things. All I'm seeing now in this last-ditch attempt, to be on the good side, in the good graces of the people, just a couple of roads being, like you're just throwing on asphalt all over the place now. That's all we're seeing. But when I look at poverty, in particular in St. John's, when I look at the dump site down there, which really I have a clear view from where I live. When I look at youth and unemployment within St. John's, I'm like, nothing has been done for us. There are a few walls up, some overpriced walls, and a smooth road for now, yes. But beyond that, there's nothing that we can account for. Is the kind of monies that we understand would have been used during that period of time. And then when we look at the national debt, or not the national debt, but the NEVIS Island debt, I had to scratch my head, and I'm like, what have we done with all this money? And we still see the kind of suffering that we're seeing in St. John's. No, he has some issues with accountability.
Mm-hmm. Now, the last time that the Premier spoke to the country in his monthly press conference was October 6th. It's now November 15th. We haven't heard from him. I don't know if there's a notice on its way. But I get the suspicion that he's not too keen to come to the public at the moment. And one of the things, or one of the reasons is that in the last couple of days, a 3.8 megawatt Wasilla engine made its way into NEVIS. And as I saw it put on a bed at Long Point Port and made its way along the Long Point Road, I noticed it was covered in a blue tarpaulin, and it had marked across it, for a sustainable future. This coming on the heels of Minister Eric Evelyn appearing at COP26 and speaking about reducing carbon emissions, and this coming on the heels of the boast in 2016 and 2017 by the Premier of NEVIS that NEVIS will become the first small green country in the world, and that he would throw the switch in December of 2017. We're 4 years on. Could it be that the Wasilla engine coming into NEVIS have been kept so quiet? I listened to the news before I came here tonight. The lead story was about reaping of cassavas at Indian Castle. Could it be that he's hoping this one goes under the radar because the dream of geothermal is far, far away? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I can well understand that he wouldn't want any song and dance about it, because ordinarily, something like that would be on TV, and everybody would be there, in their dandans, welcoming and a big speech and all that associated with the importation of such a thing. But really, they have promised us that we were going to get geothermal. They said, okay, NRP, get NRP out of the way because they haven't done what they should have done as it relates to, and they've just been pussyfooting around, excuse the language, have done nothing. Okay, geothermal, they claim that they couldn't find financing for it, but just look at St. Eustatius, we're just right there, since we said that we were going to export electricity to them. We're going to export electricity all over the Caribbean. And right now, they're far ahead of us as it relates to renewable energy. And I'm saying, even if you could not give us geothermal, at least make an attempt. And I don't think that a genuine attempt has been made to give us anything close to renewable energy that we need. And with the cost of fuel going up, and when we're talking about the cost, we're not just talking about cost at the pump. We're talking about the cost to the environment. Who is using fossil fuel? Who wants to be installing a diesel engine when we say that we have plans to have renewable energy by 2030? But we're doing nothing. All we're just doing is just talk. And that is the issue I have with my cousin. He just talks a good talk. And he's just not very good on the deliverable. And that needs to change.
Not a
we need
single...
to pursue renewable energy. We're not even seeing that we're helping homeowners to go that way. I passed by the Ivor Walters Primary last night, and all the lights were on. We're not even trying to at least cut down on the consumption. All the lights on blazing, and nobody's in the school, and I don't know what they have to value that all of the lights on the corridor ought to be on. But we're not taking this thing seriously, and that is the thing. They're not taking the people of NEVIS seriously. So that's why I don't think they're driven by the deliverables.
By your reckoning, what is the major issue, the first thing you would like to address in St. John's constituency once elected?
Unemployment. We have seen, under this administration, really, it's like you give a man a brand new car and all he does is just drive it and doesn't put petrol in it, doesn't do anything to upkeep, and then it just stops and it stalls. We're about to stall out. And unemployment is a very ticklish issue. Because if, and I've said before in a public forum, that poverty is going to lead to crime. Poverty is the mother of all crime. And we need to take that seriously. Because what we are seeing is that we're getting these personal, now and then you're hearing about these personal conflicts between people. And all these things, because youths are not actively engaged in productive activities. We need to really make sure that we train our youth and get them ready for the workplace. But when they get ready for the workplace, we must have work for them. And that is one of the issues that we have. We just have not been creating job opportunities or economic opportunities for our youth. And that is something that I think we need to address right away.
All right, thank you very much, Pat, and we look forward to having you in the studio in the coming weeks.
Looking forward to meeting with you in the studio.
Thank you very much. Well, panelists, has the articulation of Mr. Brantley got ahead of, Premier Brantley got ahead of him? Has he overpromised and underdelivered?
I definitely think so, Steve. And I think for persons my age, one of the things I think when the Honorable Premier, when he put himself out there to become an elected representative and perhaps to pursue becoming the Premier of NEVIS, I think persons, wanted to see something different and really thought that being a younger person, that he would have really bring something to the table that the people were thirsty and looking for. And I can say personally that I am disappointed. I am disappointed that, it's really a lot of talk and no substance, no delivery. I can recall in the budget debate in December last year, one of the recommendations that I put forward was that, considering that we were in a pandemic that there was a need for an economic recovery task force, so to speak, to be put in place as other countries throughout the region were doing at that time, because there was that need where expert advice was needed in order to put a plan in place to really drive the economy even during and post-COVID. And I was very much disappointed when the government took absolutely no steps to even adhere, to even implement, to even do anything in order to put a plan in place, an economic relief or recovery plan, whatever you want to call it. And so here it is that we continue to suffer here in this country. NEVIS, honestly, if we were to be honest with ourselves as Nevisions, and I believe all of us can feel it, we are stagnant. We're not moving forward. You know, there isn't any policy driven direction. We are just operating as if we just barely existing here in NEVIS, and so we don't know what are the plans forward. Where do we look to? But in the same breath, whilst we are in neutral, we have seen, as I mentioned before, numerous taxes being implemented. I mean, nothing can be more outrageous than the fuel surcharge that was added to your water. And I want to take a few minutes, Steve, to just break this down for people so that the lay persons can really understand. Now, just imagine you have a small business operating in Charlestown. Could be perhaps just a small 1 or 2 staff office, or just a business where you perhaps just selling maybe hair products. You have a bathroom facility, and you hardly use your bathroom perhaps throughout the day, maybe 2-3 times per day. And so normally before the surcharge was added, your water bill for the month perhaps on average would have been maybe $20-25, so to speak. Here it is, after the implementation of the fuel surcharge on the water bill, all businesses, all registered businesses now have to pay a mandatory $75. And so even if your bill prior to that time never amounted to even past $50, you have to pay a mandatory $75 regardless of your usage. And I'm simply saying that in these tough economic times, that cannot be right, because what it is, it's robbery really, because persons are not paying for what they use as we traditionally were accustomed to. What we are paying for is a tax, a charge, and it is just outrageous when we sit down and we look at it, because it is almost a whopping 300% increase, and all of this is taking place in the heart of a pandemic. Now, one really have to ask themselves, is this a government that really cares? And I want people to understand. Now, I can go further, because that is for businesses. With ordinary households, we see a $25 increase. Now, naturally, one would expect that those businesses would naturally pass that cost on to their consumers, and those are the ordinary lay persons, the citizens of NEVIS. So it is in effect a double taxation, because you have the burden of bearing the costs that the businesses would pass on, and in addition to that, you have to pay a whopping $25 extra on your water bill for some persons, especially those persons who are not working, the elderly, the unemployed, whose water bill may not have even come to $10 per month. I mean, this is a mandatory charge, and whilst we see taxation have increased tremendously, we are also seeing an increase in wastage. And throughout the entire island, we continue to see wastage in the civil service. We have seen the appointments of persons. Some may say that political appointments. We see people continue to use their offices in order to campaign and to basically give persons assistance with funds that they themselves have been deprived of. And I want people to understand this, especially those persons in my constituency in St. Thomas's, because I have seen now an activity where advisors and peers are going around and making all sorts of promises and assisting persons, and one have to ask themselves, where is this revenue coming from? A number of persons in St. Thomas's were laid off, lost their jobs some 4 seasons. And so here it is that you are given assistance with monies that you yourself have to continue to pay tax on. And so is it something that is really benefiting you? And this is a question that persons need to ask themselves. Are you gaining? It's just like I'm taking $10 from your pocket, and then I'm going to the supermarket and buy the orange juice for the same $10 and giving it back to you. Have you gained anything really? And this is what is happening, and somehow people are being fooled to think that they are really bettering themselves, that they are getting assistance. But how can it be assistance if it is something that was taken from you in the first place? So I'm taking from you and giving back to you what I have taken, and that cannot sit right with us as Nevisians. And I want our people to wake up and really stop being fooled. Look at the situation, assess it for what it is, and understand that you deserve better, and there is better. And the NRP is presenting a team that is quite capable of delivering and bringing better to the people of Nevis.
It's painful to hear. Dr. Daniel Hodge, Dr. Bartlett did mention that there's very little in the way of job creation. But in fact, we have been losing jobs, and you can identify it with both places I will speak about. Brown Hill Communication. It baffles me how a company could leave all its equipment, computers, and years after we can't find a replacement. You're a Brown Hillian. And then, of course, you represent St. James. I drove past the Nisbet plantation in the other day, and there's grass as high as my knee. Nobody has said to us what's happening there. At peak, they hired 75 people. So loss of jobs at Nisbet, loss of jobs at Brown Hill Communication, and many other places.
Well, the problem is that when we do not recognize what our role is with regards to nation building, we do not understand that as a government you have a responsibility to provide employment for the people. And so, you know, you would hear that businesses can make a business decision if they decide to close and leave. But what we're missing is that those same businesses would have benefited from numerous concessions, tax breaks, etc., understanding that you're getting these breaks so that you can employ our people. And so when you look at these businesses that former administrations, former premiers who have the understanding of their role to lead the country in terms of creating employment opportunities, you would give concessions, you would give breaks, you would negotiate as best as you can, understanding that at the end of the day your people will be employed, and that is what you are striving to do. We now have a government that does not understand that is their responsibility to the masses, not just a few, but to the masses. And so businesses find it easy to close up and leave because there's no consequence. Businesses find it easy to reduce the number of staff that they have working, and there is no pushback from government on behalf of the people. And this is where we have a big disconnect, because people are struggling, in need of employment opportunities, and you have a government that is allowing businesses to leave at their free will and no payback, so to speak. So they would have made their profits, and when things get a little bit challenging, rather than negotiate, and even if you have to give additional concessions, understanding that you're trying to keep people employed, then there is no regard for that. And so when we speak about the role and the responsibility of government, we understand that employment opportunities, creating jobs, first and foremost is the major mandate. And this is something that NRP has recognized. We cannot continue on the same pillars that we would have been on for the last, several years, 30, 40, 50 years. We've looked at tourism, we've looked at financial services. We are seeing where financial services, that area requires careful scrutiny, because we are seeing some ordinances that are being proposed, and we have to look at those very carefully in terms of how that is going to impact the local banks and the employment opportunities, etc. We know that we're moving towards a digital era. We know that some things to create efficiency, etc. But we must be able to balance that with creating employment opportunities for our people. And I must touch on the geothermal that Dr. Bartlett spoke about, because when you understand the reason why you're doing something, the reason why geothermal was being pursued, I can recall then Premier Parry, who indicated that NEVIS is going to be transformed by by bringing geothermal energy to NEVIS. And why do you want to have geothermal energy? We must try to look at renewable energy sources, because we know the cost of fossil fuel electricity. We have to wait and we have to rely on the transport of fuel here, and that is costly. And if when we speak about exploring and exploiting our natural resources, of which geothermal energy is one, then we are striving to become energy independent. This is something, when we speak about being self-reliant, some people misunderstand and think that we want to be separated from sinkers, etc. Far from it. What we are saying is that we have the resources and the ability to be able to sustain ourselves. And so when we look at what electricity is being used for, every single thing electricity is being used for. You need it in your home, you need it to run your hospital, you need it in your schools, you need it for Wi-Fi, etc. You need it in your barber shops, in your salons, every single business, restaurants. And so a good way to raise the standard of living in the country at any particular time is to lower the cost of business, lower the cost of living. And that is what geothermal energy was supposed to do. Dr. Bartlett mentioned that if you're able to, based on the resources that we have, the initial plan was to export energy to some of the neighboring islands. We have sat and sat and sat. Those other neighboring islands have moved forward. St. Kitts can send the Minister of Environment to COP26 to speak about reducing dependence on fossil fuel, to speak about increasing renewable energy, have a 70 million PPP arrangement in place for solar energy. And so where does that put NEVIS now with regards to continuing the efforts for geothermal energy? Now, the problem is this current government looks at geothermal energy as a project. They do not see it as a means to lowering the cost of doing business for small businesses. They do not see it as a means of making life easier and more manageable for the everyday man on the street. And if there's that disconnect, then of course you would allow that to disappear. Now in 2018, we understand that, yes, we are still moving forward with geothermal energy. We understand that we were having negotiations, and you had a new partner coming into play. But we're still renegotiating. We're renegotiating. In February of this year, we're finalizing negotiations. But press conference after press conference, and you're not hearing anything about the status of geothermal energy. Now, I'm aware of the Green Climate Fund, which is COP26 has so much to do with the Green Climate Fund, because this is where you will find the necessary funding to help mitigate or to reduce the rate of global warming. One way of doing that is to reduce your carbon dioxide emissions, reduce the use of fossil fuels. Now, there's a project that was approved for the Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean. St. Kitts and Nevis was listed as one of the participants in that project. About $26 million was allocated for St. Kitts and Nevis. That was in 2019. We understand that COVID came around, but if St. Kitts and Nevis is part of a regional project funded by the Green Climate Fund through the Caribbean Development Bank, and when you look at the progress report, you would see that an environmental and social impact assessment was done, but we're not hearing any of this. And so one must wonder if there's really any interest in pursuing geothermal energy. We know that the biggest cost for geothermal energy is upfront. Some work has been done. The Green Climate Fund provides, the main purpose of that project is to help the Caribbean countries, small island developing states, to overcome those capitalization issues. And if we're part of a regional project, which started in 2018 and is to run until 2027, to assist with geothermal development, why haven't we heard anything about this project, what it is providing, etc.? The Green Climate Fund provides, and I don't want to be too technical, but the Green Climate Fund provides funding to private entities. We can see in St. Kitts, I cannot say for certain, but we can say in St. Kitts, it's a PPP that is responsible for the solar farm that is being built there. The government of St. Kitts provided the land, and you have a company, a private company, that takes on the responsibility, etc. That arrangement would allow the company to give you a flat rate for your electricity. And so as you go out and you try to attract the investors, they would know you're using renewable energy, your rate is going to be X amount for over a period of time, and so it's much more appealing to investors. We do not have anything right now that sets us apart and make us more appealing to investors. The folly, I think, of this administration is that they would have taken the decision that they're not going to pursue any other renewable energy source, and they're going to put all their efforts into geothermal energy. But we have a wind farm which feeds into the meter and helps to reduce the cost of electricity. So why take that position, understanding the challenges? And I really can't see why it should be so challenging when other countries are able to negotiate with a private entity and move forward with development of their renewable energy to help the people, to help small businesses, to help attract investors. We are not positioning ourselves. And so whether there were boatloads of investors out there, and we now see that there's nothing appealing about NEVIS. We're not putting policies in place that would make it, some private entity would come in and say, well, I can capitalize on this type of policy that is unique to St. Kitts and Nevis, unique to NEVIS, as it was the case with the geothermal ordinance. Because even some of the studies that you look at, when they're trying to put a regulatory framework in place, NEVIS was already ahead in that regard. And so we should have been able, back in 2008, 2009, etc., When you see all the OAS, the CARICOM Secretariat, Caribbean Development Bank, all of these regional entities had NEVIS as number one in terms of renewable energy. We already had the wind energy, and the University of the West Indies came to NEVIS, had an interest in using NEVIS as a field classroom for their earth sciences project. What would that mean for our students here in NEVIS to be able to capitalize on participating in such projects? All of that has just
evaporated.
yes.
You know, it's unbelievable how time flies when you're having valuable information and useful debate. We've got just about 22 minutes left on opening night, and now it's your turn. It's rather late, but better late than never. This is your voice with the NRP. We want to hear from you. On this program, we do not have monologues. We do not entertain diatribe. We expect you to be very cordial while making your point forcefully. And so join us, please, by the telephone and converse with the Honorable Leader and Deputy Leader of the NEVIS Reformation Party. While we await our first call, Dr. Hodge, I know you had some activities on the weekend. You've been having tentacles out there in your community.
Well, I have to because change must come. Change must come, and we must find ways and means to engage the communities, and not just engage them, but to be able to have them feel comfortable enough to express some of their concerns with you. One of the issues that we realize is that there has been no real thrust with regards to industry building in NEVIS. There is no real thrust with regards to creating employment opportunities, sustainable employment opportunities. And one of the reasons why we're here tonight is because we recognize that we must hear from our people. We must understand what their real challenges are. There's no sense in saying you don't want to provide somebody with a tablet when they really need a computer, so to speak. And so those opportunities where you can engage with persons is quite important. And so I would, this past weekend, I would have had an appreciation breakfast in the village of Fountain and Mount Lily and the surrounding areas. And I must thank the residents in those areas who came out. The weather was not the best, and for a minute I thought that it was going to, not come off. But I was pleasantly surprised by the large number of persons who came out, and so I'd want to say thank you to those folks over there. One of the things that I would have gleaned from the conversations is really going back to renewable energy. If you drive through Fountain at nights, Fountain Village, there's certain sharp corners, very narrow cuts, and there's no lighting in those areas. How difficult is it if you set your vision on developing a sustainable NEVIS, and you know that each action that you take is leading to achieving the overall objective and vision? We've seen in St. Kitts how many solar lights in different areas. I've always said that sometimes we feel we have to take the entire hog. We do not see it where we can do projects on an incremental basis or community by community. Fountain and Mount Lily in that area is an area that I recognize, based on talking to the villagers in those areas, that a lot can be done focused on our blue-green economy, which means minimizing fossil fuel, maximizing the use of renewable energy. Well, like I said, there's so many things that have been discussed, but I do intend to continue that same initiative throughout different villages in St. James's. I will announce the next location, but it's really an opportunity to get close to the people, understand what their needs are, understand what their concerns are. When we speak about being neglected, and we speak about feeling, like nothing is being done in your area. What we have seen in St. James is a lot of unfinished projects, and it's amazing when you speak to people and they feel that, this was done, but it didn't create any new employment opportunities. To replace an existing edifice is not development. Doesn't bring anything new. And as was mentioned earlier, we have to create that sense of hope in the youths who are now coming up. We grew up in an era where you can look forward to, if you wanted to work in the hotel industry, in financial services, and taxis were running and boats were running, and there was just so much activity. Right now, we see where people are struggling to get employment. You have to go to the water taxi or to the ferry in town. You pray that it's not a rainy day, because that development is not complete. There's still no permanent proper waiting area. But as far as this government feels, that's good enough for the people of NEVIS. And when you look at the projects even that have been undertaken by this government, compared to prior governments, you don't see a sense of pride in what is being done for the development of NEVIS, and to feel that the people of NEVIS deserve better. And what we're saying is that you must look at building your industries. We would have had a fishing tournament that was some time ago, and that is indicative of the type of activity that you can generate in an area that was historically a fishing town, a cargo area, but nothing has been done in recent years. And so, looking at all of the small businesses that have closed, you mentioned Nisbet's plantation. There's also the Mount Nevis Hotel that was closed. But what is being done to address the unemployment in the area? You're not seeing any communication, any concern about how you can address the people. And what we're saying with the NRP is that we have a vision with regards to pursuing the blue-green economy, with regards to building industries. We know that we speak a lot about food security. It's not just from the agricultural perspective, but also from the marine perspective. We look at our fishing industry. We see no ramps. We see no piers to help the fishers.
Yes.
You see the fishers using the same boats they've been using for the last 20, 30 years. The fishing industry contributes to the tourism sector, contributes to food security, contributes to the well-being of the fishers. And so in these areas, once you are focused and you understand the reason why you are embarking on in this particular direction, then it's much easier to accomplish your objectives and to accomplish your goals.
As I said earlier, we're at November 15th. We haven't heard a press conference recently, but I could almost see in my mind's eye how December will be played out. There will be the budget. The theme will be Blame It on COVID. I remember a few years ago there was a song by Minnie Vanilli, Blame It on the Rain. But I could see the theme for the budget and the theme for the next election.
Blame it on COVID.
Blame it on COVID. But in your constituency, there's the only thing that's happening, and I could see all sorts of celebrations surrounding that. That's the opening of the Pinnis Park. That's scheduled for December. I imagine there'll be music. I imagine there will be food. But at the end of the day, will that improve the job creation? Or would it just be a fleeting illusion that we see rising there at Pinnis Beach? What are your thoughts on that?
Whilst we welcome, and it is always inviting to have additional recreational spaces, particularly for the young people of Nevis. At the same time, we must be mindful of the times that we are in, and so one would have thought that there should have been, in my mind, a balance, and so at this time, whilst a park, we welcome it, we welcome the initiative, and we are very grateful to the Taiwanese government for providing such an opportunity. One would have thought that the excitement would have really been around some sort of activity that would have created jobs on a larger scale for not only the people of Nevis 5, but all Nevigians, the entire Nevigian community. And so we have to weigh whether we should just be excited and satisfied with a park, or whether there was a need to really have a more meaningful project. I personally would have loved to seen perhaps some sort of industry, even a factory, something that would have generated employment, or would have really get the economy moving in a way that we need it to. And this is why I continue to reiterate that the policies have to change. There must be a shift. We have to focus on the economy. How are we going to drive it? And Dr. Daniel would have spoken about several initiatives about the blue and green economy, driving the fisheries, and we really need to do that. I am scared. I know my constituents are scared, because we are looking towards a future, but we are looking towards a future at the present moment that is filled with doom and gloom. I mean, we're not seeing any way out of this dark plight that we're in, because you're not being presented with plans and visions and things that could really take us, towards the future where we can have hope, hope of prosperity.
Even the Premier at his last press conference, and his last two press conferences, had said that he saw something which was signaling to him that there was light at the end of the tunnel, that the Four Seasons, who I mentioned before had been the mainstay of the economy, would have a job fair in October, or in November. That hasn't happened.
Yes.
So the prospects are not great.
Yes, but we would have seen just recently a job fair in St. Kitts at the Park Hyatt, and so as we continue, our people need hope. And I don't think that this government really understand. I don't think that they get it. It has to be, governance has to be more than winning elections. And of course, don't get me wrong, because you need to win in order to govern. I'm very mindful of that. But the focus tend to be to win and then do what? To win and then fail to govern. We are at a time where we have seen that the local government has 4 seats in the NIA. In the federal parliament, 3 seats. But we have to ask ourselves, are we in any better position? Are we being positioned to take advantage of the strong political position that we have in the federal cabinet? I mean, we're not seeing anything. I met with the Prime Minister last week on a matter of one of the ordinances that is being proposed, and we had a very fruitful discussion about the way forward for St. Kitts and Nevis as it relates to the financial services industry. And I was a bit surprised to learn that not even a simple bill that was somewhat designed, I guess, to somewhat maybe improve the financial services industry, that something like that was even discussed at the federal level. And so sometimes one have to wonder, what really is the point of having 3 NIA cabinet ministers in the federal cabinet? Does it really make sense? How is Nevis benefiting? I can tell you how Nevis is not benefiting, because what we have seen is that the lack of attention and focus on NEVIS has really hampered the progress and development in NEVIS, because I mean, let us be real and we have to be practical. You really cannot serve two masters. It is difficult to do. It's very difficult to be in two places at the same time. Okay, and so NEVIS continues to suffer from that arrangement to the extent that we are now seeing that departments, crucial departments, health is one, it's not getting the attention that it needs. And as JD mentioned earlier, you're not seeing the policies that are needed in order to drive healthcare here at NEVIS. I mean, let's face it, we have a hospital wing that is being under construction now for how many years?
4 years.
4 years. And we are nowhere near sight of a finished product, and that has to speak wonders to the people of NEVIS, and that is simply because the persons who are elected to serve in the NEVIS Island administration, they simply do not have the time to focus on NEVIS, and I cannot put it any simpler than that. The focus is not there, and so NEVIS continue to suffer. We are not moving forward. A matter of fact, we are going backward. If you ask me,
it's not just the hospital that is languishing. We've got a Mondo truck.
Yes.
In 2016 and 2017, there were drones flying overhead. This is going to be a world-class facility. People from the United States and Canada will come down for winter training.
Well, Mr. Manners, that speaks to the fact that unfinished projects seems to be the modus operandi of this government. Not only unfinished projects, but also haphazard development with regards to commencing a development activity without any plans in place. And they would have said, because they feel proud, that they could have started the Newcastle police station without a plan or without any money. We are now understanding that the area for the fire station is undersized, and whereas St. James, as you know, is a very large parish, you need a large fire truck to travel from that station if you have to go to Butlers. And so what sense does it make to be developing and not adjusting to accommodate the area that you're serving? And so you would expect that if you started a development without any plans. Most people know that when you start in a development, you have your drawings, you put them out to bid, people would bid on the drawings and give you a price based on what you have designed. So no surprise again with the hospital, because they started the hospital. I'm not certain that there was even a proper tendering process, but now you see them designing the inside. when and where have you ever seen someone designing a structure and they only give you the outside? And so where are your columns supposed to be? I'm not no engineer, but I know you need to have some understanding of what you're going to be building and have your plans to reflect that.
We've just got 4 minutes, so I've got one question each. You're going to be involved in the budget discussion. What would you like to see to get NEVIS on the move again?
I certainly would like to see a budget that is focused on economic development. I think that has been lacking for the past few years. I expect that we will be in a deficit again this year, and so that is not surprising. I think for the past 9 years we have been in a deficit. There continues to be, and I remember in last year the director of audit would have warned that, we have to curb spending, and that was a very serious thing that I pointed out, that here it is that the budget director of the NIA is saying, listen, the wastage, the spending, you have to ease up on this, you have to stop, because there isn't sufficient avenue for creation of revenue in order to create that balance. And so I can expect that the same warning again will be given this year. One would have liked to see some budgeting for a capital project. Again, I anticipate that will be lacking. And so I think what we were going to see is perhaps, a conservative budget that doesn't really propel any sort of trajectory to the way forward out of this economic plight. And again, I think this is because the government failed to adhere to advice. Whilst it was important to implement a COVID-19 task force, it was also important to have that balance and to have an economic task force being implemented in order to guide the NIA with expert advice in bringing development to the country and trying to forge our way out of this economic situation that we are in.
It's hard not to go on a mad spending spree when you're making a last desperate bid to get re-elected in 2022. Dr. Janice Hodge, we'll close out with you. What else can we expect for the NRP for the rest of the year and in the new year going forward?
Well, for the rest of the year, we have a number of strategies that we're looking at. We have already identified the framework upon which we would want to be able to govern, and we really are looking at how best we can strategize to ensure that they are aligned with the economic position that the country is in right now. We understand that in terms of education, there are a number of students who are still not in a position to maintain the level of performance because of lack of necessary equipment, etc. And so aligning our policies with the needs of the people based on the economic conditions are the things that we would have to look forward to and work on to ensure that our measures, our policies can be attractive to investors, but also at the same time provide the type of employment opportunities that we would need to lift our people out of the current economic depression that they're in right now.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, 1 minute to 10, and you've been listening for the last 90 minutes, 89 minutes in fact, to Your Voice with the NRP. And we realize that our listeners have been so glued to their radios as you share on YouTube and Facebook, that they haven't even moved their hand to pick up the phone because they've been so enraptured. But we'll be back next week and every Monday going forward with Your Voice with the NRP from 8:30 to 10. It's been an absolute pleasure bringing our debut edition. I'm sure you had fun, and I know our listeners did as well, while soaking up so much information. Good night. Until next week.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the NEVIS Broadcasting Company Limited or its